So Alyssa, if you want to go ahead and take it over. You guys, this is, I'll let you introduce yourself because I got a lot of feedback with people popping in. So I'll let you take it away. Thanks, Alyssa.
Can you guys hear me? I just realized I think I was on mute.
Yeah.
You can hear me. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for coordinating this. I've heard we have record attendance today, so it's really exciting. And hopefully some of you are kind of tuning in today from all over the country. So my name is Alissa Palladino. I am a registered dietitian based in Atlanta, currently based in my kitchen. And I've been contracting with corporate Health Unlimited, which runs the fitness centers at the various Cox locations for many years now, maybe going on 5. And I've been a registered dietitian for nearly 8. I work with all sorts of people, all sorts of different health goals and conditions in a variety of different settings. And today's one of my favorite topics to address, which is really some fundamental nutrition concepts and then sort of applying how we can eat in a way that really optimizes our health, our performance both at work and in our workouts, and weight management, which I know is always a topic on many people's minds, especially this time of year. And I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but Amy let me know that some of you are participating in Cox's wellness initiative for the new year, the Shred program, which I love because it's focused on building healthy habits that are sustainable. And so I think that what we'll be covering today, really honing in on the food and the nutrition side of things, will hopefully support those of you doing that challenge, and also those of you just generally looking to eat in a way that supports optimal health, performance, and weight management. All right, let's jump in. All right, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to start by covering some nutrition foundations, which is talking about macronutrients and micronutrients, terms you may or may not be familiar with, but you will be after today. We'll go through hydration guidelines. Then we'll circle back to food and talk about balance, timing, and portions. Then we have a section on calories and how they relate to weight management. And then we'll wrap up, time permitting, some basics around fueling for exercise. I learned since putting together this presentation that a dietetic intern at Cox is going to be giving a seminar specifically on fueling pre and post exercise next week. So if for some reason we don't get through my slides today, know that you are in good hands and we'll learn this information again shortly. We'll start with nutrition foundations, macronutrients and micronutrients. Sometimes people have heard this term, maybe they're familiar with counting macros, maybe they've never heard this term before, but basically macronutrients are nutrients that we need in larger amounts. We have to get them from our diet. We can't make them in our bodies. And they provide us with energy, also known as calories. So this is where we get all the calories in our diet, from one of the 3 macronutrients. So there's carbohydrates, there's protein, and there's fat. Again, they're all 3 essential, and we require a balance of the 3 each day. So what they have in common is that we get them from food and they give us calories, but each macronutrient does play a different role in food and in our bodies. So we are going to go through each of them, starting with carbohydrates. Now, I know carbohydrates have gotten sort of a bad rep in the last decade or so, but really they are, from a nutritional standpoint, very important for being a quick, easy source of energy. They're the primary fuel for our brains, so we're trying to focus and be efficient during the workday. We want to be fueled with carbohydrates. And they are also the most important fuel for our muscles during exercise, especially at higher intensities and for longer durations. Carbs become increasingly important as a fuel source. When we eat carbohydrates, it does directly impact blood glucose or blood sugar, which is in part some of the confusion around why they may or may not be so good for us. But really, having our blood sugar rise after we eat a carbohydrate is just a natural and normal part of metabolism, and part of the way that we get energy from eating carbs. For heart health and a number of other health outcomes, we want to focus on our more nutrient-rich, fiber-rich carbohydrates, and I'll give you some examples on the next slide. And we want to limit some of our less nutritious sources of carbohydrates, so our refined grains and our added sugars, with the exception being immediately before and during exercise, when actually the simpler carbs are better. And I do mean here, when I'm talking about limiting refined grains and added sugars, I do mean limit. I don't mean eliminate. There's a difference there. And as you'll kind of hopefully glean over the course of the presentation, we really want to approach nutrition from a balanced perspective rather than kind of an extreme black or white. All right, so here are some of our more nutritious food sources of carbohydrates. Oats, whole grains, that includes brown or wild rice, quinoa, farro, barley, and bulgur, among many others. Whole grain bread, wraps, and pitas, whole grain pasta, or maybe a chickpea-based pasta. Fruit, excellent source of carbohydrates. Starchy vegetables, which includes potatoes, corn, and peas. And then our beans, lentils, and legumes, which we typically think of as vegetarian protein sources, but they're also sources of fiber-rich carbohydrates. So our next macronutrient is protein. And a lot of times when I talk about protein, or ask people what they think about when they think about protein, they think about muscle and like meat. And actually both those associations are correct. So protein is important for really building and repairing all the different tissues and cells and organs in our bodies, including building and maintaining muscle. Also, eating protein helps us feel more satisfied for longer and helps us kind of control our appetite and manage our hunger better. For heart health, once again, like we want to focus on fiber-rich carbs, we want to focus on our leaner animal-based sources of protein, as well as incorporate some plant-based sources of protein, so we can limit our intake of saturated fat. What the research shows is too much saturated fat in our diet can raise our LDL cholesterol and increase our risk for heart attack and stroke. The key with protein to really optimize how it manages hunger and how it supports muscle and metabolism is to spread it evenly throughout the day. So you want to have a good protein source at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, at all your snacks, rather than maybe skimping at breakfast and lunch and then overdosing with a big steak at dinner. Your body's not going to use the protein building blocks the same way. All right, some protein food sources. We've got our poultry, so our chicken and turkey go skinless for less saturated fat. We've got fish and seafood, red meat, so lean beef, bison, and pork. We've got our eggs and egg whites. Dairy, which includes milk, yogurt, and cheese. Our beans, lentils, and legumes, so some of our more plant-based or vegetarian sources of protein here. All our soy products, so tofu, tempeh, edamame, soy milk, and then nuts. Nuts and seeds do contain some protein, but they are primarily good sources of our third macronutrient, which is fat. When I talk about dietary fat, I always like to clarify that it is not the same thing as body fat. So we don't eat a food with fat and gain body fat. That's not how it works. We'll talk about how we do gain body fat later in the presentation. But both are important, both fat in our bodies and fat in fuel. So fat and food. So we know that too much body fat increases some health risks, but it also plays, too little is also dangerous, right? So it plays important roles in insulation, protecting our organs and tissues. It's a stored fuel source, and it's necessary for making optimal hormone levels in both female and male. And then dietary fats. When we eat foods that contain fat, we're going to have more flavor, we're going to feel more satiety, so more satisfied for longer, and it assists with nutrient absorption. So specifically our fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K are better absorbed with a fat source. So you're eating a spinach salad, lots of great vitamin A and vitamin K in there. Pair it with an oil-based dressing or maybe top it with some nuts or seeds that are going to give you that fat to absorb those fat-soluble vitamins. For heart health, primarily we want to consume unsaturated fat, so the ones that are liquid at room temperature. And usually those are found in plants, but there are some exceptions. And we want to limit, not completely eliminate, but limit our saturated fat and our trans fat, which are going to be mainly found in our fatty animal foods and in our processed fried foods. So some of our more nutritious sources of fat, nuts and nut butters, so maybe that's your almond butter, your peanut butter, seeds, so like your flax, your chia, pumpkin, avocado and avocado oil, olive oil and other plant oils, olives themselves, fatty fish, so this is kind of an exception to the plant-animal rule. Fatty fish like salmon, tuna, and mackerel, and I believe herring should be on this list too. Maybe haddock, I'm not sure, but you're going to get these really healthy omega-3 fats when you're eating these oily fishes. And then cheese, so some of the fat that's found in cheese is saturated, but with cheese you're getting some other nutritional benefits like protein and calcium. So I kind of keep it on that list of like it's a healthier fat source to incorporate. So there you go. Carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, they play different roles in our bodies. All are essential, and we can find them in a variety of really nutritious foods. So as opposed to macronutrients, we also need micronutrients. So these are also essential, meaning we must get them from food. Micronutrients, just a fancy term for vitamins and minerals. We need them in much smaller amounts compared to macros, like milligrams and micrograms compared to grams. And they do not provide any energy. They don't give us calories, right? But they do play essential roles in getting calories or energy from food, or from the macronutrients, and really just like very interconnected with definitely different aspects of our health and well-being, disease prevention, producing energy, our metabolism, the immune system, and then exercise performance and recovery. We need our micros. The best way to get all the micronutrients that you need is by eating a balanced diet, one that focuses on really nutrient-rich whole foods. However, if you are following a restrictive diet for whatever reason, preference, allergy, health condition, there are certain micronutrients you may end up not getting enough of through your diet, and you might need to supplement in those cases. So I never want to say like food first is going to work for food first, but sometimes there is, a role for supplementation. So B12 is very challenging to get on a completely vegan diet. Calcium also can be challenging to get on a vegan diet, or if you're just eliminating dairy. Iron, same thing. So as far as a completely plant-based diet, you might want to supplement. And then an individual needs vary a lot. All right, so before we get into our next section, Amy, are there any kind of relevant questions that we want to address at this point?
No questions so far. Sorry, you guys, for all the lobby pop-ups. I know that's annoying, but I had that switched on the settings to be off, so I don't understand why people are even going through the lobby. But nope, we're good. We're going to continue on. You guys feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go. We'll take little stops and address them along the way. So go ahead.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I'm hoping that just means that everybody's like really understanding what we've been covering so far. And Amy, thanks again for monitoring the chat box. I appreciate that. Okay.
So our next question, really two questions here. Where does milk fall in the nutrients list? And then we also heard that corn is more difficult to digest. Could you speak a little bit on that and then speak a little slower?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I get so excited. Yeah, absolutely. So dairy actually provides all three macronutrients. So milk is what you're asking about. So milk is going to give you some carbohydrates, lactose, sugar. It's going to give you some protein. So a glass of milk is 8 grams of protein per cup. And then depending on the fat content, it's going to also give you some fat. So skim milk or fat-free milk won't give you any fat, but a 2% will give you a few grams, and a whole milk will give you maybe up to, I think, 5 grams of fat. So actually you're getting all three macronutrients from milk, as well as some micronutrients. So it's a really great source of calcium and vitamin D, and potassium, which is an electrolyte, and even some vitamin A, and phosphorus. So it's actually, for those of you who are like open to drinking dairy and can tolerate it well, it's a really nutritious source. And then as it regards to corn, some people may or may not digest any food on this list better. Corn, I like to put it on the list of carbohydrates because sometimes there's some misconceptions around starchy vegetables not being good for us, and they are really good for us. They've still got all the kind of like fiber and vitamins and minerals and great things that you get from eating plants, but nutritionally, because they're starchy, they're more similar to like oats or pasta or bread or grains, compared to like a non-starchy vegetable like broccoli or string beans or asparagus. So they're if you can digest it and tolerate it well, there's no reason not to have corn. You just want to count it nutritionally on your plate as a carbohydrate rather than as a vegetable, which will make more sense when I talk about my components of a balanced meal, not in the next section, but in this section after hydration. So
okay,
stay tuned. Okay.
2 more for you, Alyssa, and then we're going to move on. I think this is a good stopping point for counting your macros. What do you think about counting macros? A lot of gyms, a lot of trainers will have people count macronutrients and different percentage levels. And then the last one is benefits of the different almond milks or nut milks versus regular milk. And then we'll head on to the next section here, guys.
Some big questions here. So, as far as whether I would recommend tracking macros, it really depends on the individual and what your goals are, and also how kind of comfortable you are, how solid of an understanding you have about food and nutrition, because it can definitely become sort of this confusing and unnecessarily confusing task be doing. But basically, the goal of tracking or counting macros is to give you a little bit more insight into where your calories are coming from. So you could be trying to eat, say, a 1,500 calorie diet or a 2,000 calorie diet or a 3,000 calorie diet, and it's like, well, what percentage of those calories are coming from carbs, protein, and fat, respectively? That matters. I think there are actually something called the acceptable macronutrient distribution range, which provides recommendations for what percentage of your calories should be coming from each of the 3 macros to make sure you're still getting everything you need in that right balance. And within that range, it is indeed a range. So we've got a range for carbs, protein, and fat, and you can kind of set your goals accordingly. I think for most people, it's more approachable, realistic, and sustainable to think about building a balanced plate and incorporating a food source of each of the macronutrients and vegetables at each of your main meals, which we'll talk about in a second, rather than like counting. And also, when you're counting macros for the day, you might not be eating balanced meals. So maybe you're hitting your macro targets by the time you go to sleep, but maybe any one of your breakfast, lunch, dinner, or snacks could be lacking in one or the other. And so in that case, you wouldn't have the same sustained satisfaction and energy than if you just focus on more of a balance each time you ate. But certainly something that is, a valid approach that works for some people, depending on their goals. And then the milks is like I can honestly give a whole different presentation on different milks. If you don't tolerate dairy well and it's the lactose that's the issue, the lactose sugar, I would say try to look for a lactose-free milk, like a Fairlife, because that way you're going to get all the protein and calcium and vitamin D and all the good stuff just without the lactose. But your plant-based milks are everywhere. I would say make sure you're looking for a no sugar added, like an unsweetened version, just to make sure you're not getting extra calories from the sugar that's in the traditional versions of most nut milks, and just recognizing that the nut milks don't give you protein unless they've been fortified. So start reading your labels, cashew, almond, coconut, oat milk. They're usually not protein sources unless they're specifically fortified with like a pea or hemp protein. So not giving you quite the same nutrition as dairy. But soy would, if you're looking for a nutritionally equivalent non-dairy option, soy milk is very similar to dairy milk. These are great questions though, guys, and I'm glad to address them. All right, so let's just quickly cover hydration because I think a lot of you guys are adding activity, adding exercise, and even if you're not, we really do want to stay hydrated. Fluids are absolutely essential for life. Our body's actually about 50% water, and it's necessary for regulating our body temperature. It's needed for energy reactions. So the same way that our vitamins and minerals are involved in getting energy from food, so too is water. It also helps maintain the proper electrolyte balance in our blood, so the proper levels of sodium and potassium that we again need for health and energy. And it helps us remove waste through our kidneys. So a lot of times I'm very purposely not using the term detox here because it's January and they're everywhere. But naturally, our kidneys will remove waste products if we're drinking enough, assuming they're working properly and we're drinking enough water. Really, the key is that we want to stay on top of our hydration during daily life. We do not want to wait until we're excessively thirsty to start drinking. That could mean that we're already dehydrated and we could start to feel some of the side effects of that, like foggy brain, not thinking quite as well, definitely not getting as much out of our workouts. And sometimes thirst can masquerade as hunger. Not always, but sometimes we think that we need a snack and actually we'd be better off just kind of drinking a glass of water. For most adults, I would recommend a base of 64 ounces per day is kind of a good start, and then realize that there's other sources of fluids that I'll get to on the next slide that are also coming in. That recommendation to drink half your body weight in water, that does actually work for some people, but it's truly not evidence-based. I have not been able to find any research to support that recommendation. I would imagine that for people in larger bodies, it could really dramatically overestimate their fluid needs, and you could lead to like overhydration or just like having goals that you never will be able to hit. So start with that 64 ounces, 2 liters, and then remember too that you want to replenish any sweat losses during exercise. More of an issue in the summer. I know we're in January right now, but if you're going out for a really sweaty long run or bike ride outside, especially in the heat or the humidity, you want to make sure that you replenish your sweat, and weighing yourself before and after can be a way to gauge how much, with 1 pound being equivalent to 16 ounces of fluid that you need to replenish. So some tips for staying hydrated. I know whether you're in the office or you're working from home, you get busy, you forget to drink. I hear that all the time from my groups and my individual clients. So first and foremost, mainly water. But if that's boring for you, recognize that really any naturally sugar-free beverage will count. You know, we don't want you drinking sugar, like drinking tons of juices and iced teas and things like that. But there's lots of beverages out there, including tea and coffee and seltzer, that are, yeah, they're naturally sugar-free and they give you a little bit of extra oomph compared to plain water. Also, if you are eating a diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables, or if you're eating soup or drinking dairy, that also contributes to your fluid. A lot of fruits and vegetables are like 90% water. You can also try adding lemons or frozen fruit or even herbs like mint and basil to your water. It gives it a little hint of flavor, again, without that added sugar. Definitely recommend investing in a reusable water bottle. And then based on the size of that bottle, you could set some goals for how often to refill it. So I mentioned earlier, like 64 ounces is equivalent to 2 liters. So if you get a water bottle that's 2 liters, maybe one of those Nalgene's, you could set a goal to try to finish one of those bottles before lunchtime and the other bottle before dinner. Then if you decide you want to have a cup of coffee in the morning, a tea in the afternoon, a LaCroix with lunch, that's sort of bonus, but at least you've sort of met your baseline needs. If you're someone who likes those little, like, not so environmentally friendly, but whatever works, those like 16-ounce water bottles that you can get in bulk at like Costco, you know, multiply how many you're going to need to hit your 64 ounces and then, you know, try to get through those. Again, not very environmentally friendly, but I certainly have clients that prefer those. And if you forget to drink during the day, you know, you find yourself like it's 2 o'clock or whatever time it is now, 2:24, and you're like, okay, the last thing I had to drink was my coffee in the morning, then maybe you want to set a timer to kind of go off every hour and remind you to drink. Or there are even some apps that like are specifically designed to help you remind you to drink. Or sometimes I've seen people with those water bottles that actually have like they track the amount on it and little reminders for like what time you want to have like reached each mark. So that could be something that's helpful. And don't drive yourself crazy. There's no like perfect way to be hydrated, but if you are concerned, you can just kind of monitor your urine, the output and the color. You want to look for a nice light lemonade color. If you find yourself not having to go at all during the day, or it looks more like iced tea, then gotta step up your fluids there for sure. Okay, all right. So again, I'm trying to slow down. I get very excited about this content and I want to make sure we get through everything while addressing your questions. But any questions about hydration or fluids?
Yeah, well, we do have some questions here. They're a little, two were from the last section there. So we have several. So just if you want to kind of be brief on them, but what's the difference between whole wheat and semolina, Semolina?
So semolina is a type of wheat, like a variety of wheat. Like there's like Durham wheat. There's different like brands isn't the right word. That's not the right word at all. But semolina is basically a different type of a wheat plant. The difference between a whole wheat or any kind of whole grain and refined grain is how it's been processed. So when you start with a whole wheat, or really any whole grain, there's a bran, which is the outer layer, a germ, which is this like oily little piece inside of it, and then there's endosperm, which is all the starch. And so when you're eating a whole grain, or including a whole wheat, you're getting the bran, so you're getting fiber, you're getting the endosperms, you're getting some good fats and some good protein and some other nutrients, and you're getting the starch that's in the endosperm. But when you make like a white flour or a fine flour, you strip away the bran and you strip away the endosperm. So you're losing the fiber and some of the other nutrients, and you're just left with the starchy endosperm. And so that's why when you're eating a refined grain product or like a white flour based product, it's going to potentially spike your blood sugar and not leave you as satisfied as when you eat a whole grain, because you're getting the fiber and the protein and the fat that keeps things stable. So yeah, I would always try to make at least half your grains whole grains. That's the recommendation. But the more the better. Yeah, the more you can kind of shift your carbohydrates towards those whole grains, the more you're going to benefit from a health standpoint. It's a great
And
question.
the next one is, can you throw some light on inflammatory and non-inflammatory sources of food? This is kind of wide here, but why wheat gluten is considered inflammatory, and this really goes per person, you guys. So not all gluten is inflammatory for every person specifically, but I'll let you hit on that, Alyssa.
Yeah, another kind of hot buzzword is like anti-inflammatory. I would say that there is some science and some truth to the fact that certain foods can promote inflammation and certain foods can reduce inflammation, but it's less about like going crazy over every single thing you eat and more about your overall dietary pattern. So if you're eating like the typical American diet where you're eating a lot of fried food, a lot of refined grains, a lot of added sugars, saturated fats, processed meats, that does tend to have like an inflammatory effect in the body. And I'm not going to get into the specific like ways that's happening on a cellular level, but yes, that does promote inflammation, and that inflammation is then tied to increased risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, a whole bunch of different conditions. On the other hand, again, no specific individual food necessarily, but like a dietary pattern that you're eating a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables with lots of different colors, lots of antioxidants, you're eating nuts, you're eating omega-3 fats that are going to be found in those fatty fish, as well as in walnuts and chia. Those antioxidants, those omega-3s, and kind of other plant compounds that are even found in like coffee and tea and red wine have an anti-inflammatory effect, and thus could be protective against those kind of chronic conditions that are associated with inflammation. So again, I wouldn't say like to like completely rule out any specific food or think that one magical food is going to like decrease inflammation, but your overall pattern can be more inflammatory or less inflammatory for sure.
And we'll do just a couple more here. We'll hit on, is it good to replace sugar with honey, on that kind of change, as well as we have another person who said they became vegetarian 3 to 4 years ago, did see a huge improvement in their health, weight loss, high energy levels, less fatigue, but they heard that in the long run that may not be good for them. Is that true?
So I'll address that one first. I think that whatever label you give your diet, vegan, vegetarian, plant-based, whether it promotes health and whether it's sustainable really depends on the individual, but also the food you're choosing. So you could like slap on a vegetarian or even a vegan label on your diet and then just be eating a bunch of like processed foods that happen to be like nutrient poor foods that happen to not have meat in them, right? Because truly the definition of a vegetarian or vegan diet is that you're eliminating either all animal products, dairy and eggs, or, so it's more whether this style of eating is going to promote health, energy levels, weight, depends on what you end up eating, right? If you end up eating a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans and nuts, you probably are going to see improvements in your health and your energy levels and your cholesterol and your blood sugar. But if you're eating a bunch of Oreos, then maybe not. Okay, so as far as it being sustainable and healthy long-term, yeah, again, it really just depends on making sure you're getting enough protein from your plant-based sources, making sure that you are, if you're not eating dairy, or if you're not really getting any animal protein, that you check your iron levels, check your bone density, check your B12, and then supplement if needed. But yeah, it can definitely be a very healthy and sustainable eating pattern if done, if planned and done appropriately. And as far as sugar and honey, do you want to address that? So sugar is sugar is sugar. It's got 4 calories per gram. It really doesn't offer much else in the way of nutrition. Honey, maple syrup, agave, coconut sugar, raw sugar, brown sugar, pretty much is all the same in our bloodstream. There are some trace nutrients in, say, like molasses, and there's, some folks that may find that they have less blood sugar rise after they eat agave versus white sugar. Certainly people like the taste of honey or maple syrup better, and in baked goods or in oatmeal, it can add a different flavor profile. So maybe you end up eating less sugar overall, but nutritionally, kind of how it affects the bloodstream, it's pretty much the same thing.
So last one here, and then we're going to move on because I think it's a good way to end this section, is can you overhydrate? I've had a lot of people ask this as well in personal coaching sessions. What are your thoughts on that? And then we'll move on to the next section and we'll hit those other questions a little bit later.
Yeah, that's a great question. And then all these are great questions. So yes, it is possible. It's very rare. So If you find yourself maybe going off some guideline, like I mentioned earlier, the drink half your body weight in water that doesn't really have true basis in science, and you are in a larger body that has you drinking a ton of fluid, that's possible that your target is just too high and you kind of want to circle it back, try to meet that 64 ounces, and then everything above that is bonus. The time that we see like health risks or danger come from being overhydrated really tends to occur only in like endurance sports. So if you are like running or cycling for like hours at a time and you're sweating a lot and you're only replenishing the water but not the electrolytes, so the sodium and the potassium, you do risk diluting your blood concentration and getting to a condition called hyponatremia, which is very, very dangerous, or hypokalemia, which is low potassium, low sodium, respectively. So yeah, it is possible, but very, very unlikely just in daily life. Good question. But like I mentioned earlier, if you're concerned about, how well hydrated you are, check the color of your urine. There are some supplements that will affect the color. So if you're on like certain vitamins, that might not be the best gauge. But for most of us, just making sure it's a nice light lemonade color is a good way to know. All right, so let's make this a little bit more practical. We've talked about macronutrients. I don't know if we've talked too much about vegetables yet, but I know that vegetables are a big part, or trying to eat more vegetables is a big part of the SHRED program, at least, which is a great healthy habit. So we'll kind of circle back to that a little bit in this next section. We're going to talk about building balanced meals, timing of your meals and snacks, and then also portions. So because when we're thinking about how to eat for optimizing health and optimizing performance, and again, I mean both performance as in sport, but also as a worker and as a human, we want to consider not just what we're eating, but also when we're eating and how much we're eating. It all plays a role. So we'll start with the what, and like the person who asked earlier about like, should I be tracking my macros? What's the benefit of that? And I kind of alluded to the fact that, well, instead of just like looking at macros in grams and how much you're consuming for the day, instead maybe a more sustainable, realistic approach that's actually practical is thinking about when you sit down to a meal, what are the building blocks, what are the components that you want to have on your plate so that you're getting the balance of all three macronutrients and enough vegetables. So here's what I want you guys to think about when you're like, okay, I'm sitting down to a meal, how do I make sure I'm getting enough carbs for energy? I want to have focused. I want to, power through my day. I want to be satisfied. I don't want to be hungry. I want my muscles to grow. I want to enjoy my food. And, I want to reap all the benefits that can come from a healthy diet. Well, this is an approach that you can really apply in any setting. And no matter what your dietary preferences are, you can find foods that fit each of these categories. So we definitely want to make sure we have ample amount of vegetables at our meals. That's going to give us volume. That's going to add dietary fiber, which helps with cholesterol and blood sugar control. It's going to give us those vitamins and minerals. Remember those micronutrients and those antioxidants. So we're thinking about inflammation. The more colorful veggies, the better. Then the complex carbs, and we have a great list of our more nutrient-dense carbs earlier in the slides. That's going to be the fuel for our body and our brains. The protein source, whether that's coming from plants or an animal source, is going to help us stay satisfied, manage our hunger, support our muscles and our metabolism. And then finally, having that healthy fat source with our meal is going to help us absorb fat-soluble vitamins, make hormones, keep us satisfied, and of course, make our food taste better, right? So it's just a template. The exact proportions are going to depend on the individual needs and goals. For someone trying to like reduce calories and lose weight, I often start with like try to build half your plate with vegetables, and 1/4 of your plate with a complex carb, 1/4 of your plate with a lean protein, and then a small amount of a healthy fat. For someone who's trying to like fuel for marathon training, they probably want to make half their plate carbs for energy, and then maybe a 1/3 of their plate lean protein, and then not overdo the veggies, just to make sure they're getting enough calories that they need. So lots of different ways to build your plate as long as it has all 4 components. And just to kind of illustrate that this doesn't mean really dramatically changing up your eating habits or kind of going like doing something super extreme, I just put together just some easy ideas for both lunch and dinner that sort of fit this template, that have a protein, a carb, a veggie, and a fat, and are things that you probably are eating anyway and just maybe need to tweak a little bit to make a little bit more balanced. So like a sandwich, right? Your turkey, your ham, your roast beef, maybe your tuna, that's your protein. The whole grain bread or sub or wrap or pita is your carbohydrate. The lettuce and the tomato is your vegetable. And then for your fat, you can add some cheese, hummus, or guac. So really, a simple sandwich can absolutely be a template for a very nutritious, balanced meal. And also very affordable. Another option would be maybe like a tuna or egg salad. That's going to be your protein in a whole wheat wrap as your carb with lettuce and tomato. And the tuna and the egg both would have some fat already in it. So you don't necessarily have to add, but you could add some cheese or guac or avocado. Another example, and you'll have these slides, so I'm not going to read through all of them, but if you do a salad as a basis for a meal, a lot of times people either go, like they skimp totally and they just have a green salad with like cucumber and carrots and tomato, and then they wonder why they're like hungry 20 minutes later. Or they get a salad that like has all the crazy toppings and all the dressing, and then they're like, well, why aren't I seeing the results, that I'm looking for? I thought I was eating healthy. So here's kind of a way to make your salad a balanced meal. You start with a base of greens, and that could be arugula, spinach, romaine, whatever you like. You want to make sure you top it with a protein source. So tuna's great, grilled chicken, salmon, tofu. That's maybe your protein, right? Then you want to have some sort of carbohydrate for energy, and that can either be a bean. Black beans are great in salads, chickpeas, corn, quinoa, really any grain. And then for your fat, maybe you put some crumbled feta or goat cheese. Maybe you add some nuts, seeds, avocado, or an oil-based dressing. And so then your salad is a balanced, satisfying meal. All right, not going to go through the rest of the examples because, again, you will have the slides. And then same thing for dinner. It doesn't have to be like some crazy recipe or some like really unappetizing, like healthified recipe. I love the one sheet pan meal. So you basically get your protein in the form of, say, salmon or chicken or pork even on the pan. You get your carb in the form of a sweet potato, white potato, red potato, all chopped up, and then whatever vegetable you want to put on there, whether it's Brussels sprouts or asparagus, string beans, cauliflower, it's all good. Coat it with a little bit of olive oil for your fat, salt and pepper, whatever herbs and spices you want, and then your entire balanced meal is cooked on one sheet pan. So you can feed your whole family that way, or if you're meal prepping, you can divide it out and eat it for lunches and dinners throughout the week. So that's just an example of, applying that template to a real world example. A stir fry would be another great example. The mixed veggies, obviously your veggie. The brown rice or quinoa is your carb. And then the protein would be the chicken, shrimp, or the tofu. And then the oil or the marinade would most likely be your fat. So just some other ideas here. You can do this on the grill. You can do this with pasta. You can do this with a turkey or veggie burger. You can do it with Mexican, with fajitas or tacos. You can do a crock pot meal. But yeah, as long as you're thinking about, okay, do I have the vegetable? Check. Do I have a protein? Check. Do I have a carbohydrate? Check. Do I have a healthy fat? Check. You're good to go. And you can incorporate the foods that you actually like. Breakfast, a little bit different. You still want all three macros, right? You still want carbs for energy, protein for satiety, fat for nutrient absorption and flavor. Bonus if you can get in some veggies. So a couple examples where you could get the veggies in, say you're making a smoothie. Maybe you've got a banana and some frozen berries as a carb, right? Because remember, fruit's a good source of carbs. Maybe you've got some Greek yogurt or protein powder, or even silken tofu as your protein. Maybe you throw in some avocado or nut butter or flaxseed as your fat. You can also get some spinach or kale into that smoothie, right? So then you've got all four components. Same thing with a tofu scramble or an egg scramble. The egg or the tofu would be like an omelet type of thing. The egg or the tofu would be your protein. You can you saute it with some oil, or maybe you add some cheese or avocado as your fat. You serve it with some whole grain toast, or some roasted potatoes as your carb. And then, yeah, you definitely can get some spinach, onions, peppers, tomatoes, mushrooms. The world is your oyster. So there's some ways to get veggies in at breakfast, but as long as you've got all three macros, that's honestly more realistic for most people. So just a couple different ideas here. Let's see which ones I want to highlight. I'll highlight the egg muffins. So if you've got a muffin tin, this is a really easy thing to do. You just throw in your eggs, your liquid egg whites even, different veggies that are chopped up, maybe things you have left over or just things that you like. You can add some cheese, even potatoes and beans or corn, and you just bake them in the oven. And so then you've got these little muffins that are actually eggs. And you can, have a couple of them for breakfast or even as like a post-workout snack. And you can buy them. You can buy egg muffins now, but it's pretty easy to make them yourself. And then overnight oats is a great one. So a lot of times when we're eating oats for breakfast, and again, oats are definitely a nutritious, fiber-rich carbohydrate, great for blood sugar, great for cholesterol. But usually when we eat oats, it becomes a very carb-rich breakfast and maybe doesn't have enough protein and fat to keep us satisfied. So if you're someone who eats oatmeal just prepared with water, and then you add dried fruit, and you add maybe honey, or you add brown sugar, or even if you add fresh fruit, you're getting carbs and carbs and carbs. So what we want to do instead is making sure we're getting some protein. So maybe you're going to make that oatmeal with milk, or like soy or dairy milk, or maybe you're going to do overnight oats where you're getting in a good scoop of Greek yogurt in there, an excellent protein source. And then making sure you have some peanut butter on there or some chia seeds in there to give you that fat. And so that oatmeal then becomes more of a nutritionally balanced, satisfying breakfast. Okay, so again, you'll have those slides. So if you want to try anything else on that list, you definitely can, and I would encourage you to do so. All right, so we talked about what to eat, right? The components of a balanced meal and some ideas. When we eat, sorry, that can be nearly as important as what we're actually eating when it comes to trying to optimize our energy, our mood, our performance at work and in our workouts, and even our hunger levels. So we don't really want to go drastic long periods of time between eating. Our blood sugar is going to naturally drop. We're going to start to get hangry. And so it's in that point, it's harder to concentrate at work. It's definitely, you're not going to get as high quality workouts. But it's a lot harder to make food choices that support your goals, because if you go into a meal and you're ravenous, you're just going to want to grab whatever's convenient. You're much more likely to make an impulse choice, right? So really, I would try to think about your day and the hours that you're awake, the hours that you need to be energized and focused, and plan meals and snacks you're eating every 3 to 4 hours. Doesn't work for everyone, and there's no one size fits all strategy. I know I'm going to get some questions about intermittent fasting here, but typically I'd say for most people who are trying to optimize their energy and regulate their hunger, start with your breakfast within a couple hours of eating, and then try to plan lunch, snack, dinner, snack, whatever you need so that you're kind of fueled throughout the day. Definitely consider the time that you're trying to exercise so that you don't go into your workout totally famished or overly full, and making sure that you can then recover from exercise with a good meal or snack, and plan ahead. Planning is literally half the battle. So have those times planned and then have those foods ready. Okay, so the last kind of topic when it comes to how we're going to eat to optimize our energy and our performance is how much we're eating. So 2 different terms here. Serving. A serving is the amount of food, and it's used in consumer education materials, including on the food label, right? So if you're looking at a food label and you see the calories, the fat, the carbs, the protein, the calcium, you've got to know what serving of food is giving you that amount of calories, fat, carbs, protein, right? So there are these standardized servings, and they more or less resemble what maybe a typical person would eat. But you may need or want less or more than 1 serving. And so that other term, portion, is what you actually consume. Sometimes, we use the term interchangeably, but just kind of know that depending on your needs and goals, you may want to be eating less than 1 serving or more than 1 serving of a food, but you have to look at what the serving is on the label to know what you're getting from it, if that makes sense. I know the labels can be really confusing, and actually in the last few years they modified it. The image on the right is the newer food label. So the serving size is highlighted now so that people actually pay attention to it, because people are pretty much ignoring it. The calories are highlighted too, which I think is just kind of reflecting the fact that more and more people are concerned about their weight, and calories are a tool in your toolbox for weight management. And then some of the micronutrients at the bottom are different. So vitamin D was added and potassium was added. But again, you might not care, but just so that's the difference between the 2. When you don't are eating foods that don't have a food label, or you don't want to like weigh and measure out your food, or you're eating in a restaurant setting, I just love using your hand as a way to estimate your portion sizes, because you always have your hand, right? You don't always have a food scale or a measuring cup. You certainly don't want to bring a food scale or a measuring cup into most eating settings, except for maybe in your own kitchen. So the hand, the full fist, is about a cup. So if you're trying to eat a cup of oatmeal, if you're trying to eat maybe a cup of fruit, if you're trying to have a cup of vegetables, if you're trying to have a cup of pasta, just eyeball about your fist size, okay? And that's a good gauge too for like a medium piece of fruit, like your apple or your orange, fist size. Okay. The front half of your fist is about a half cup. So again, maybe for your rice or your pasta you're trying to have, or your dry oatmeal, you're trying to have half a cup, you can eyeball the front half of your fist, half a cup. For your palm, the palm is about a 3 to 4 ounce protein portion, both in the size and the thickness. I guess everybody's hands are a little bit different size, but yeah, so if you're trying to have a 3 to 4 ounce portion of fish or meat or chicken, you can sort of eyeball your palm. And then also know that maybe you're trying to have a 5 or 6 ounce portion of protein, and in that case, your full hand is a better gauge. The thumb, the tip of your thumb is about a tablespoon. So maybe you're trying to use a tablespoon of peanut butter on your apple. Maybe you're trying to use a tablespoon of oil to cook. The thumb, the tip of the thumb is your tablespoon. And then the tip of your pointer finger is a teaspoon. So maybe if you're using a less healthy fat source like butter, you would want to, or mayo, you'd want to keep it to about a teaspoon. So that's at the tip of your finger. So yeah, I love that. I think that's very helpful, and hopefully will be helpful for you guys too. And just to visualize, I wanted to go through each of the macronutrients and just show what a typical serving, again, your portion might be less or more, but a serving of a carbohydrate-rich food such as black beans, brown rice, or sweet potatoes is a half cup. So you can see what that looks like here. The serving size for a protein food is about a 3 to 4 ounce serving. So your pork, your fish, your chicken. So you can see how that looks compared to a hand. And again, your portion might be much bigger, but the typical serving size is supposed to be about 3 to 4 ounces, or the standard serving size. And finally, with fats, so a quarter cup, which is the equivalent to 1 ounce of nuts. So you can kind of see what that looks like here with almonds. These are food models, they're not real. And then the peanut butter, that's actually 2 tablespoons of peanut butter next to a 1 tablespoon serving. So just to kind of visualize how it fits. And as you can note, the portion size, or the serving size for carbohydrate food is a lot bigger than the serving size for a fat food, a food that's high in fat, because these foods are going to be a lot more calorically or calorie dense for a smaller portion. And then finally, so we're talking about balance, timing, and portions regarding your main meals. Those concepts apply to snacks too. So we don't need to think about snacking as something that's going to derail our healthy eating goals or our diets. In fact, well-planned, well-timed snacks can actually be ways to add nutrition to our day, keep ourselves energized, keep ourselves satisfied, and help us even make more nutritious choices at our main meal. So we want to follow these guidelines for snacks. What are we eating at our snacks? So it doesn't have to mean, Cheetos and Cheez-Its. We can think about trying to incorporate real whole foods with more nutritional benefits. So I always like to think about pairing a fiber-rich carbohydrate, so maybe an apple or some whole grain crackers or some baby carrots, with either a protein and or a fat source. So maybe some peanut butter or a cheese stick or some avocado. That balance, that pairing, or call it power pairing sometimes, is going to keep you a lot more satisfied and energized than just one food on its own. And again, focusing on nutrient-dense whole foods, not necessarily your traditional snack foods. When? So we already talked about, so eating consistently throughout the day stabilizes your energy, keeps you satisfied. So thinking about where you need to add a snack. If you have breakfast real early and lunch real late, probably a mid-morning snack would be a great option for you. You're getting the kids off to school, you're eating breakfast at 6, lunch is at 1, trying to have a snack at 10 a.m. would be excellent. Maybe you're someone who eats breakfast at 9 and lunch at 12. You don't need a mid-morning snack because that's 3 hours, right? So in your case, maybe you have lunch at 12, dinner at 7, an afternoon snack around 3 or 4 would be great for you, especially if you're trying to get in a workout after work. And then portion sizes, how much you eat at snacks. Yeah, especially with your more calorie-rich, fat-rich foods. Love our guacamole, love our hummus, love our nuts, love our nut butters. We know that these are very fat and calorie-rich food. So just be more, pay more attention to the amount you eat. And if it helps, invest in the single-serve options or pre-portion them out. I'm a big fan of those little like snack packs of nuts, even the little peanut butters, almond butters that come in squeeze packs, the guacamole and avocado that comes in those little tubs. Anything that you can use to make portion control easier, I'd say go for it. These are some balanced snack ideas. So basically that power pairing concept of some sort of fiber-rich carbohydrate with either a fat source or a protein source. So just hopefully some good ideas for you here. All right. Got one more big section to handle. I don't think we're going to get to sports nutrition today, but that's okay because you're going to get a great presentation on it next week. If it's okay with you guys, I just want to actually go through these slides because I feel like we'll have questions at the end regardless, and then we can kind of go based on time. I want to address calories and weight management because I know some of you doing the shred program are probably, have a weight loss or a fat loss goal. And it just tends to be something that people are thinking about, especially this time of year. And there's some misconceptions around how diets work and which diet is best and even how to go about weight loss. So the first thing to understand is calories. So if we're trying to lose weight, we absolutely have to be in a calorie deficit. You could be eating the healthiest diet in the world full of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and grains and lean proteins. But if you're eating more calories than you are burning, you will gain weight. If you're eating the same amount of calories as you're burning, you will maintain your weight. And if you're eating fewer calories than you are burning, you will lose weight. So that's what we refer to as the calorie deficit. And remembering that calories are just a unit of energy. There's no moral value assigned to them there. They are not the devil. They're not the enemy. We actually need them to support our survival and certainly to function and thrive. So we want to understand this idea of calories in, calories out, because like I just mentioned, we need calories in to be less than calories out if we're trying to lose weight. And if we are unintentionally gaining weight, it means that calories in are greater than calories out. We're in a surplus, not a deficit. But here's the thing that people misunderstand. It's not this simple equation of burn off everything you eat. No, it doesn't work that way. So let's look at a little bit more detail where the calories are coming in and how they're coming out, because I think this is what's like most misunderstood. Okay, in calories coming in, food and beverages, no other way. They're not sneaking into our bodies overnight while we're sleeping. We're either eating them or we're drinking them. Okay. Macronutrients, right? Carbs, fat, and protein, they give us calories, and we can get them from food and from drinks. All right, so calories out. This is what we typically just think of exercise, right? Let me go on the elliptical, let me go for a run, let me burn off the calories I'm going to eat. Yes, exercise, as you can see on this list, is one component of calories out, but it's a pretty small component. Most of us have maximum an hour a day to devote to exercise. Maybe it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes, maybe it's 0 minutes. Maybe we're training for a triathlon and we carve out 2 hours a day, but still, it's a small part of calories out. We also have activities of daily living, so just going about living our lives. Some of us are more sedentary, more seated. We've got desk jobs, we've got commutes. Some of us are more active. We've got jobs where we're on our feet all day, right? Or we, have commutes where we're walking or taking a bike. So our activities of daily living can definitely play a role in the calories out and sort of tipping that scale in one direction or the other. We've also got the thermic effect of food, which is just the calories expended when our bodies break down food for energy. And then finally, the biggest component of calories out is our resting metabolic rate. We sometimes call this our metabolism. We sometimes call it BMR or RMR. This is the amount of calories that our bodies expend at complete rest in 24 hours just for survival. Okay, so it doesn't count for anything else we're doing besides just our organs are functioning and we're staying alive. Okay, so again, this is the biggest component of calories out. It depends on the individual, and a number of different factors influence our RMR. Our age, our gender, our height, our weight, our dieting history, our hormones, medications, so many factors. We can estimate this number using an equation, and that's how some of the calorie calculator tools you'll find online will do it, or you can measure it via metabolic testing, which is a breath test. Contrary to popular claims, you'll see the only real way to increase your metabolism long term is to build muscle, because muscle is metabolic active tissue that burns a lot of calories at rest. Okay, so if you there's no like cayenne pepper or anything that's maybe in the 5 calories extra that minute you eat it. But really building muscle, so strength training, eating enough protein, eating enough calories, the only way you can really increase your metabolism. You can also decrease your metabolism by losing muscle. And that will happen if you go on to an extreme of a diet, if you're eating way fewer calories than you require for survival. If you're doing a ton of fasted cardio, you definitely can lose muscle, and that can slow your metabolism down long term, which makes weight management a little bit more challenging. So, we're in this era of like all these different fad diets, from keto, intermittent fasting, we've still got paleo, and Whole30, we've got Weight Watchers, we've got low carb fans, high protein fans. If the goal is to lose weight and your diet is working for you, it's doing that because it's putting you in a calorie deficit. So really any pattern of eating or any diet that you can stick to consistently that has you eating in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. There's no specific macronutrient composition that's more effective long term. So like low carb in the short term, you're going to lose some water weight, true. But long term, any calorie restricted diet you could stick to is just as effective, whether those calories are coming from protein, carbs, or fat. On the flip side, you can gain weight, gain body fat from over consuming calories from any of the 3 macronutrients, right? So if you are consuming more calories than you burn from fat, you can still gain body fat. If you're consuming more calories than you burn from protein or carbs, you can gain body fat. So it's the calories in a deficit or surplus that affect. That said, you still want a balance of all 3 macros, but most importantly is figuring out a way of eating that you can sustain and be consistent with long term, and that you actually enjoy. Some people will then ask, okay, you're talking all about calories, I'm trying to lose weight, do I have to count calories? Some people do, and some people find success with that for holding them accountable and just kind of gaining awareness of how much they are eating or not eating. But another approach that I would recommend is thinking about making your calories count. So thinking about how much nutritional bang for your buck you can get from the foods you choose. The more you focus on nutrient-rich foods, the majority of the time, and then less often, less frequently, not never, but less often, you choose some of those more calorie-rich foods that don't offer as much in the way of nutrition. That's kind of a good solid approach to think about. Most of the time, am I getting enough vegetables, fruit, grains, beans, nuts, lean proteins, right? Less often, I'm going to have, chocolate cake, right? But you can still have it, just not like maybe every day and not a whole cake. All right, so just an example here of a calorie-dense versus a nutrient-dense meal. You get a lot of calories and not much in the way of nutrition with your fast food meal. You're getting a lot of nutrition and not many calories in this, example with your roast chicken, your sweet potato, and your broccoli. I always just want to point out here, very, very important, that understanding weight is not the only indicator of health. So we do know that many health conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, even some cancers, are associated with being at a higher body weight. That's true. And so a lot of times when people are trying to lose weight, they're health motivated, and that's fine. But recognize that you can improve your health and lower your disease risk by making changes to your diet and your exercise pattern, regardless of any changes that those changes have on your weight. So if you start eating more vegetables and choosing more lean protein and whole grains, you will probably decrease your risk of diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease and cancer, even if you don't lose weight by making those changes, if that makes sense, okay? So weight is not the be-all, end-all. Some of you may also be wondering, why is she talking about weight loss? Really, we should be talking about fat loss, and that is true. Our weight is made up of, if we step on the scale, our weight is made up of both body fat and lean tissue. That lean tissue includes bones, organs, and muscle. So truthfully, yes, when we're talking about weight loss conventionally, we really mean fat loss. We want to maintain as much of our bone and our lean muscle as possible to support a health and metabolism while really targeting that body fat loss. And how do we do that? Well, we don't want to go on an extreme diet. We don't want to go long periods of time without eating. We want to have a modest but not extreme daily calorie deficit and be consistent with it. So a small daily deficit that you can achieve consistently will lead to consistent weight loss. Not eating less than that resting metabolic rate, because at that point we do risk losing muscle and not just body fat. So we'll see weight go down, but it won't be all the kind of weight we want to see go down. Definitely prioritizing protein, and like I mentioned earlier in the protein section, eating that protein frequently, consistently throughout the day. So having a good source at all your main meals and your snacks. Doing regular strength training, and then limiting excessive fasted cardio. Not that you can never go out for like a 20-minute jog or a walk fasted, but if you're doing any kind of high intensity interval training or endurance exercise, making sure you're fueled before and that you have a solid recovery nutrition afterwards, which is the last section of this presentation that we're not going to get to today. But I will leave you with, for this section, thinking beyond the scale, not getting so caught up on the weight, and really thinking about, how do my food choices make me feel? How's my mood? How's my energy? How's my sleep? How am I performing in my workouts? If I'm feeling sluggish, maybe that means I need more carbs. If I'm getting injured, maybe that means I need more antioxidants and protein in that window after, right? So really making sure that any steps you're taking towards a weight loss goal, and if that's one of your goals with your nutrition, those steps should also support your health, both mental and physical. So definitely trying to lose weight, you should never sacrifice your health in the process. Avoiding those fad diets, remembering short-term diets tend to lead to short-term results. So really wanting to find a pattern of eating that you can follow long-term, that's really healthy and sustainable, and honestly, that's enjoyable for you. So I'm going to skip through this next section. Hopefully, Olivia, your dietetic intern, will be able to cover those topics in depth next week. And I will leave you with just some takeaways. And actually, I don't know how much time we really have for questions. I'll try to take a few, but just recognizing nutrition does play a powerful role in many different aspects of our health. Hydration is essential too. Definitely encourage you all to think about eating balanced meals that include all 3 macronutrients if the goal is to stay energized and satisfied throughout the day. So we want to have some kind of complex carb, protein, and fat on our plates. Thinking about the timing of your meals and snacks so that we can stay energized and satisfied. Understanding calories and how they work for successful weight management. Ditching the fad diets and instead really focusing on foods that help you feel good and support overall health. And just finally trying to find and then commit to a pattern of eating that is sustainable for you, realistic for you, and enjoyable. So thank you. You guys have asked some great questions. I do have a few minutes. I can take a few more, but I would encourage, for anyone who wants more individualized support, through the fitness center, Cox employees have access to individual nutrition counseling, metabolic testing in certain scenarios if you're here in Atlanta, and meal planning. So go ahead and get in touch with Amy Bush, who organized this presentation, or Jacob Yount, to learn how you can take advantage of working one-on-one. And that's all I've got for today.
I wanted to see if Sereni was still there in Austin. I know you had your hand up. If you had a question, wanted to hit you first. They may have already left. Okay, let's see.
All right.
We had several other ones. Let me try to pick some here.
Great.
Sharon Irons, you had your hand up too. Did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Actually, that was a great presentation. That was wonderful. That just like kind of hit my brain. It's like, that's so common sense. That's, that somebody can understand. So thank you very much. I have a simple question. I looked at Dale sauce.
Okay.
It's a marinade.
Okay.
And I looked at the bottle and it said 1 tablespoon had like 1,200 calories, I guess, sodium. So it was like some enormous amount of, I guess, what do you call that? Units of sodium in it. One tablespoon. And so my question is, I wanted to remind myself, when you see the calorie, when per serving, right? When they're talking about per serving, all the nutrients at the bottom is just in that 1 serving. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yeah, so what you're referring to, you're like kind of hitting on a couple key points is it's important to read food labels. It's also important to understand that sometimes the marinade or the dressing or the sauce is giving you nutrients that you're not really thinking about. You might not be aware of how high in a certain nutrient a sauce adds. Even with olive oil, right? It's very good fat, but it's high in fats, high in calories. So good to read labels on foods that have labels. Pay attention to the serving size, and yes, recognize that if you're eating more than one serving, you need to multiply that several times to reflect what you're actually getting. So sodium, we didn't get too much into micronutrients today. Sodium is a micronutrient, it's a mineral, and it affects blood pressure. It doesn't have calories because remember, micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals don't have calories. But it does have an effect on health, and that effect primarily for most of us that we're thinking about, it affects blood pressure. So if we eat too much sodium in our diets, it puts stress on our blood vessels, it raises our blood pressure, it puts stress on our hearts, can increase risk for heart disease, kidney disease. The other time sodium comes into play is with endurance athletes. If you're sweating a ton, you're losing a lot of sodium, and then you actually need to replenish it. But for most of us, we want to limit sodium for heart health. So it is something, especially if you have high blood pressure, if you have a family history of high blood pressure, to look at that in your foods. It's going to be very high in processed foods because it's used as a preservative. So condiments, like you're mentioning, soy sauce, teriyaki sauce, lots of different salad dressings, canned foods, a lot of times shelf-stable processed foods are going to be some of your food sources of sodium. So yeah, it's important to start reading the labels. You can see on this example, I don't actually even know what food this is for, but it's got 160 milligrams of sodium per serving. I honestly don't know what it is, but maybe some kind of like granola bar or something. But that's not a lot. The standard recommendation for the whole day is 2,300 milligrams of sodium. Some people with heart disease might have an even lower target, but if you're trying to eat 2,300 milligrams for the entire day, 160 isn't a lot. If it was 800 milligrams, which you might find in like a tablespoon of soy sauce, that actually is quite a lot. So yeah, definitely read your labels.
So it said the serving size was 1 tablespoon, and at the bottom it said the sodium was 1,300 calories.
No,
and so
no, not calories, milligrams. Remember,
milligrams, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I see that.
Yeah.
But that was just for 1 tablespoon.
Yeah.
So if I went over,
food.
Yeah, so if I went over just by, I say, I want an additional tablespoon, because what's a tablespoon, right? That means I'm going to have more than my sodium in that one sauce for the day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
Okay.
so what I was pulling out of my fridge was this soy sauce, which is the less sodium soy sauce. I don't know if you guys can see this, but the 1 tablespoon, it's only got 5 calories. So soy sauce is not a source of calories, but it's got almost 500 milligrams of sodium for 1 tablespoon. And I don't know about you, but I rarely use like a tablespoon of soy sauce. I'm just, pouring it over my whole stir fry, right? So
Exactly.
I'm probably getting like 3 tablespoons. So that's like almost 1,500 milligrams. And this is the less sodium soy sauce. So bottom line being, read your labels, pay attention to serving sizes, and pay attention to which nutrients are a concern for you. If you're really trying to reduce calories, you got to look at calories. If you're trying to increase protein, look at protein. If you're trying to increase fiber, look at fiber. If you're trying to reduce sodium, look at sodium. But yeah, it's only accurate for whatever the serving size is listed there. Pay attention to that. Yeah.
All right, we have another one here. They kind of go hand in hand. Do you think it's better to eat no carbs or light carbs for dinner and have your carb more stacked at lunch? And then the other one that kind of went along that line was, what is your thought about eating more calories during the middle of the day and less towards the evening? Does it make a difference with your weight?
Yeah, these are both great questions, and they're going to be the last that I actually have at 3:15. So, oh no, I don't. It's not till 3:30. Okay, so I will thoroughly address this. Okay.
But we'll wrap up at 3:15 too, Alyssa, so we don't take too much of your time here.
Okay. So that's a really good question because we want to think about food as fuel, right? And fueling our bodies during the day when we need that energy, right? And specifically knowing that the main role of carbs is that energy source, it kind of makes sense to think, okay, let me make sure I have energy at breakfast, energy at lunch, maybe energy at my afternoon snack. At dinner, if I'm just going to go to sleep, like how much energy do I really need? So yeah, it's not a bad idea to focus on having more carbs at breakfast, lunch, and maybe in the afternoon and have lighter carbs at dinner. But it really depends on the individual because if you're someone who's doing like a pretty intense workout in the evening, and then dinner is your post-workout recovery meal, and you skimp on carbs, you're not really optimizing your recovery. You're not optimizing like refueling. And so you might, end up feeling really hungry an hour later, and then you devour like a box of cookies or a box of Cheez-Its. Whereas, sorry, I'm being like so negative about Cheez-Its today, but what tends to happen is we don't eat enough carbohydrates as part of a meal when we need them. Our bodies are smart and ends up craving them a little bit later, and then we're going to choose most likely a less nutritious form of carb. So a lot of my clients find that like, okay, they were trying to eat just like chicken and asparagus at dinner, and then they found themselves, eating chips and cookies later at night. Well, when we added a healthier carb to dinner, so chicken, asparagus, and sweet potato, chicken, asparagus, and quinoa, chicken, asparagus, and rice, they did feel more satisfied, and then that late night snacking kind of dissipated. So I wouldn't try to go too light or eliminate carbs from dinner completely, because you might just end up eating them in a less nutritious form later on. But yeah, the idea of carbs being energy and fueling throughout the day is very valid. Same thing with the bigger meal at lunch. That doesn't apply to everyone. Some people don't like eating a bigger meal at lunch, or they frankly don't have time to. I know at Cox you guys work very hard and like you're busy. So, it might not be realistic for you to have your biggest meal at lunchtime, and that's fine as long as you're still having a balanced meal at lunchtime. You're not skipping lunch, and you're not overeating at night. Really, really good questions. Okay. Thank you guys for sticking with me all this long time. I hope this was helpful. I will send the slides to Amy, and I guess the recording will be available as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alissa. Thank you, guys. Remember that she is open also for, individualized sessions. If you guys need it, you can also sign up for that through myself or Jacob. We'd love to give you guys a little more in-depth look at your dietary needs and what you may need. But definitely let us know. And thank you so much, Alissa, for, going a little over here to address all the questions. Nutrition is one of those things that I love to talk about and hear about. And, but it is one of the hardest things to get in line with your fitness journey. So thanks so much for all your knowledge. And thank you guys so much for attending. This has been the biggest one we've had so far with over 200 plus people. So thanks so much. And we'll send out that the slides
Pleasure.
and the recording.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you so much for getting this all coordinated and everyone for sticking around.
Of course. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day.